Wolf and Dulci Show. The Wolf and Dulci Show.
Welcome to the Wolf and Dulci Hour, coming to you mostly live at the Machinima Expo, the 6th Machinima Expo, believe it or not. Time flies. And I know that everyone here listening in the future is having a great time. Hi, Wolf.
Hi, Dulci. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm just excited, fabulous. Thanks for asking.
We have a very special guest with us today, the one and only Hugh Hancock. Hello, Hugh.
Hello, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. It's amazingly sunny in Scotland at the moment.
So, Machinima Expo, 6 years. Hugh, I know you're very familiar with the term. I think Wolf had a question for you on that one.
That's right. Godfather of the term machinima itself. Where did it actually come from?
Well, oddly enough, machinima actually came from me not paying close enough attention to something online. I've been involved in what became machinima since the very start, since Diary of a Camper, pretty much. And back in the day, it was all the machinima was created using Quake. Now, it was becoming obvious around about 1999 that this was not going to be a useful way to... We couldn't refer to these things as Quake movies, which is what they had been called, for terribly much longer, because Half-Life was coming along, Unreal was coming along, and so it was increasingly inaccurate. And also several of us, Paul Marino and the rest of the Ill Clan, Frank Delario, myself, a fair number of other guys, some of whom are still active in the machinima world today, were hoping to have this taken a bit more seriously as an art form, and again, calling it Quake movies didn't really work for us. So there was a discussion about this on the Quake 2 demos mailing list, which was the centre for Machinima before I launched Machinima.com. And Anthony Bailey, who was responsible for the Quake Done Quick series, suggested an idea for Machinima, machine and cinema put together with an E rather than an I, which is what it's got now. And I thought this was a fantastic name. And at the time, myself and Gordon MacDonald had decided to found a central hub site for this new art form, and we decided to use Anthony's name. So we called it Machinima.com with the I, because neither one of us bothered to reread his email and check that it was actually how it was actually spelled. We registered the domain name, site went live, massive success from the outset. And sometime later, Anthony, who actually lives in the same city as me, got back to me and said that he was really flattered that I decided to use the idea for his name, and he was really impressed with the change that I'd made to it, because machinima with an I was much better because it also contained life. It was machine anima, machine life as well as machine cinema. And of course, I had planned absolutely none of this, so I did what any self-respecting person would do. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I'm glad you liked it."
Because that's how we'd all react.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly hope so.
Sometimes the best decisions are done by accident.
So you've seen a lot of changes, obviously. I mean, you've been part of breaking ground with Machinima since the beginning, and here we are, 2013. Things are happening now that I don't think anyone could have imagined 10 years ago that we're able to do at our computers at home.
I had no idea the direction that the art form was going to go in, even as you say, 10 years ago, when it had been around for 6 years and we thought we had some handle on what was going to happen, and we just didn't have a clue.
I was looking through your blog a little bit this morning and enjoying some of your your informative ways of letting us know about some of the things that you've been using. One in particular is your experience with the motion capture suits recently.
Yes.
I want to know why we can't see this video, this behind-the-scenes video you referenced.
I thought it was pretty self-explanatory for anybody that does read the blog, why you won't put the video up.
Which video was that?
The one
your testing of one of the mocap suits.
Oh, well, you see, the problem with much as motion capture suits are absolutely wonderful, they do have a number of sartorial problems. I mean, I've now tested probably more than half a dozen different motion capture systems, built one from scratch, actually, And yes, the one we built from scratch, the major downside was that it had two 12-port USB hubs strapped to your chest at all times, which wouldn't have been too much of a problem if it wasn't for the fact that those USB hubs were mains powered. So you also had to drag around a pair of four-gangs to power the darn things while doing your motion capture. So that didn't get publicised on the blog because that really did look very silly indeed. And the current motion capture suits we've got are truly amazing. They look really great. They look like X-Men suits. The only problem is we've discovered that while they are not in any way transparent when you're looking at them with the naked eye, if you take any kind of video footage of them, they are really quite transparent. Something that I found out when we'd taken a picture for the blog. I was editing it to upload it in Photoshop, and I noticed that both myself and my colleague Ian's underwear was clearly visible. Oh yeah, they're a little bit sheer.
So if you go to strangecompany.org and look at the blog there's a very lovely censored photo taken from the video we're not ever going to see apparently. So the pains we take for our craft, right?
You're not kidding. Just getting into one of those things is a bit of a challenge.
I imagine that's something you want to do in a private dressing room. But some of the other technology you've been dealing with, do you want to talk about any of that? There's so many that you're on, I don't want to just randomly choose one because you probably have a favorite or two. Just scrolling through your website, looking at things like motion capture, Unity, is it Oculus Rift? Am I saying that right?
Oculus
Yes,
Rift.
yes, the Oculus Rift, yes. Yes, it is. It's absolutely amazing. It's going to change everything.
So for those people who don't know exactly what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, so stuff that we are playing around with at the moment, the Oculus Rift is one of the most exciting things. That's basically, it's a set of virtual reality glasses. Old people like me who remember the first time virtual reality came around, back in 1993 or so, will remember that there was an enormous amount of excitement about the idea of being able to literally have your entire sensory field filled with a virtual world and walk around in it, and this was going to change everything. And then it didn't, because in the mid-90s, virtual reality technology was terrible. It was really, really bad. So everyone forgot about it, but for a few obsessives, one of whom had been collecting every single type of virtual reality headset anyone made, eventually came up with a prototype, happened to show this thing to John Carmack of Quake, Doom, id Software fame. Carmack thought that this thing was the best thing ever, and it turns out that this guy, working pretty much alone like most of us machinima filmmakers, had managed to solve almost all the technical problems that made virtual reality not work. And so by stealth, overnight, virtual reality has suddenly come back as something that's actually doable. So I got one of the early test models of the Oculus Rift. I've got two of them, actually, and I've been experimenting with them, and they're just astonishing. They're absolutely astonishing. The applications in games, in general productivity, and for machinima are absolutely huge.
I think you're absolutely right with the technology. Obviously, in the past, the rudimentary and the initial phases, you see those blocky platforms, and still with the immersive nature of it, people thought that this was the next big thing and how awesome it was going to be, and then it phased out into basically nothing land until you started seeing I think some pop culture TV shows and some and science fiction type stuff started rehashing it, and like you say, you have some creative people that took the old technology and worked it around and made it viable again. But the current incarnation of it and the version of it with Oculus Rift stuff is very, very impressive. I've seen a lot of the videos of the initial games that they've created for it, and the applications seem pretty much endless at this point, I think.
Well, the fascinating thing with it, and this is something that I'm keeping a close eye on, is across the board there have been a bunch of technological innovations in the 2000s that didn't appear like that big a deal at the time, but are driving an entire new wave of technology now. I mean, the technology that's in the Oculus Rift is essentially the same technology that powers the motion capture suits I use. which is strongly related to the same technology that's being used for this thing called Cast AR. If you've seen it, which is augmented reality stuff. It's absolutely amazing. Basically gives you a Star Wars 3D chess set, among other things. And that's related to the technology that's powering drones, everything from Predator drones the US military use down to drones that are being used for deliveries, unmanned aerial vehicles as a whole. And this stuff is all connected, and all of this stuff comes out of phone development because it's all about cheap gyroscopes and high-quality screens. And everything is just cross-pollinating to an amazing extent at the moment. You're seeing new technology pop up on Kickstarter, practically every other day. And it's largely because there were all these base innovations of things that didn't look like they had anywhere near these many applications, that are just starting to bear massive fruit at the moment.
And you're absolutely right. And it's very, very impressive where we talked about it a little bit on the front end in terms of what that means for the producer directors, the individual studios or small studios that from our own capacity, our own capability, because as this type of technology becomes available, and a lot of the back end stuff, I think that with open source app development that really to me kind of sparked that trend of software companies and even hardware companies putting out to market access to back-end programming and allowing people to get in behind the nuts and bolts of it to further the cause, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting thing, actually. I think pretty much every year for the past 10 years, I have said this is the most exciting time to be involved in filmmaking and machinima. And
but
every year it's been true. It's been true every time. It's just the options and the level of democratization of film is just getting better and better and better. I mean, I'm in the process of finishing off my current huge project at the moment, Death Knight Love Story, which was the first one that Strange Company has done using motion capture technology and working with well-known actors like Brian Blessed. And as a result, I'm looking to our next project right now, and I'm amazed at how far things have come in the past few years, in terms of popular acceptance of the idea of watching series on YouTube, in terms of accessibility of things like monetizing machinima, the Blizzard licenses, the Microsoft licenses, the fact that people understand a lot more about how to run a YouTube channel now, and it's a much more accepted thing. It's not this weird out there thing that's fun, but no one would ever take it seriously. We're looking at, for our next project, there's a high chance that we're going to end up using the same kind of ray tracers that Pixar use. And I mean literally very close to the same technology, because whilst I've been busy making a film, path tracing has quietly gone from the point where it takes hours to render a single frame, to minutes to render a single frame, to I'm using a path tracer now which takes half a second to render a frame, which is approximately the same that we're spending on conventional game engine technology.
Was the path tracing that you're talking about, I noticed on your blog you'd mentioned something associated with path tracing and some real-time lighting. Is that?
Basically, the specific path tracer we're using is a GPU-based path tracer, so graphics card-based path tracer. Let's try saying that 5 times fast. Called Octane. But in general, the technology, once again, has quietly developed for the past few years and has suddenly broken out this year. Everything's getting to the stage where it's not quite fast enough for games use yet, but it is fast enough for machinima use. And then at the same time, other graphical techniques. I mean, I won't massively graphics geek at you. I could talk about voxel cone traced global illumination and other things, but it all starts getting a little bit opaque. But the quality of real-time lighting is getting to the point where we may not need to use a path tracer because you can achieve almost the same things using simplified techniques.
Well, one of the things too that Dulci put on her Scoop It page, she has a page that she'll grab snippets from, and it comes out of Lucasfilms, and it's behind the scenes of real-time animation in their studio using their mocap suits and using
yes.
their real-time stuff. And when you start seeing that, my brother's actually in video production. That's what he does for a living, and they own their own company. They don't do movies; it's mostly corporate stuff. But at the same time, I shared that video with them. And for somebody else, so you're seeing a team of 5 people. You know, you've got 2 actors in the mocap suits, and you've got the 3 technical staff working the computers and processing the real time animation with their obviously their character models over top of the capture data, and it is thoroughly impressive. You know, it just takes it when you look at Star Wars being what it was as a groundbreaker to begin with.
Yeah.
That today in real time, when they can have actors creating these scenes with the technical component, the real time animation, and like you're saying, then the render component being brought up to snuff so that the render farms, they can start producing movies in half the time.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned the LucasArts thing. I actually ended up chatting a bit with one of the guys working on it on Hacker News. And the interesting thing that he said about that was that the thing that's driving this is the fact that games production and film production are getting closer together than ever before. The skill set that you need to be an artist on games is now pretty much the same skill set you need to be an artist on Hollywood movies. Right. And so the technology is coming together.
Well, you look at too, is that even from a monetary standpoint, the games industry is basically getting to the point where it's exceeding the Hollywood scenario from a monetary standpoint. And you look at almost any game out there now, they're developing new technology for pixel management, for graphic processing, and like you say, the actual artists that are coming into play, and the level of quality of actual gameplay now is very much like what was only used for small cinematic clips, like you'd see in some of them, whereas that's actual gameplay now, it seems, in some of the new releases.
Which, again, I mean, brings enormous possibilities to Machinima. I mean, one of the things that I've found very interesting is since 2010, when we started using motion capture, what Strange Company, what I'm working on at Strange Company is essentially the same pipeline and the same approach to filmmaking that Peter Jackson is using on the Tintin movies or James Cameron's using on Avatar. And it's essentially what we have now is we have the possibility for there to be an independent indie movie virtual production world. See, it's CG movies aren't just made by Pixar anymore. You can actually make them independently using essentially the same technology, and that's amazing. And
high quality too. It's not necessarily where you're going to be walking around with a stick figure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are still challenges. The biggest challenge that I face at the moment is content creation in terms of creating character models, creating environments. The motion capture means the animation's no longer a problem, and that was a huge problem for many years. But indeed, that was kind of the problem that one of the big reasons that people like myself and Paul Marino leapt on Machinima when it came out is because it was so much faster than keyframed animation. So motion capture solved those problems, but creating original content is still very, very slow and expensive.
Then that's where you have to start utilizing emerging technologies that are paying attention to that sort of community. Like, if you're familiar, obviously, with us, we utilize Reallusion's iClone software for our deployment of Machinima. And that's as a content developer for that's the type of stuff that we look at, and you start gaining what was a very small company catering to a very small, tiny niche market is now expanding such that you have other game studios now adding content into the marketplace, and you have developers like myself that are developing content for free use within the community for those environments, and with the pipeline and technology to be able to bring in third-party applications like you're talking about, your character motions and moving these around and combining it with Unity engine for rendering and all this stuff. It makes it extremely, extremely impressive.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. I think the growth of content marketplaces is actually one of the most interesting things that's happened. I mean, content marketplaces have been around for ages. Turbo
Mm.
Squid's been out there for what, 10 years now,
Yeah,
12
long
years?
time, long time.
Hmm.
But it always used to be terrible. I mean, I remember, I think I've looked at Turbo Squid every couple of years for the past decade, and most of the time I've looked at it and I've gone, new, and moved swiftly on. Um, but things like the Unity Asset Store, I mean, that was one of the things that blew me away working with Unity. The
Sure.
quality of the assets on there and the sheer amount of the assets on there is mind-blowing.
Well, you
I
have
mean,
some of these worlds that get created, you know, a medieval world that you want to take and you want to populate now with your character and render out. You know, you can go on there and for a very nominal price, you can have all kinds, and there's a lot of free assets as well, but even
yeah,
commercialized licenses, you can talk to the developers. That's the one thing that we found very, very impressive with these communities is that it's very easy to reach out to these content developers and say, hey, listen, I'd like to commercialize this in a feature film or whatnot. What will it take for me to have the rights to use it? And most are very reasonable in it. They'll say you can use it for your own production, even if you're monetizing it. So it's really, really neat.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the negotiating with content producers has actually, I think, always been one of the hidden weapons that lets you do a lot more with Machinima. I mean, we ended up negotiating with Valve Software a couple of times back in the sort of early 2000s. We got the rights to use Half-Life commercially for a couple of things, and Lithtech at one point as well. Obviously, we developed a tool based on Lithtech, and if you talk to people, it's amazing what you can get done. You know, far more than you'd expect.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
just like there are those of us who just love making the movies or love writing the movies or love acting in the movies, there are people who their main passion is making the content. So
Yeah,
they're more
absolutely.
than happy to jump in and help out.
And I mean, on the other side of this, this applies to the conventional film industry as well. I mean, the reason that we got to work with such big names for Death Knight Love Story was because I reached out to a bunch of Hollywood casting agents. And I didn't have anything like the budget they're used to working with, but Gail Stevens, who cast Slumdog Millionaire, among other things, heard what we were doing, thought it was an interesting project, and their passion is film and filmmaking. They want to help filmmakers. So in that case, they went, well, yeah, okay, we can do this. It's a small project, and we got to work with these incredible names and this incredible casting company just basically because I'd asked, and they were interested in the project.
Which is fantastic. Again, and it's the same thing we've found with, you know, audio producers, music scores, that type of stuff. You have so many talented people, and obviously with the internet. And I find that these people that get involved in these various communities, whether it's smaller communities, larger communities, you have the Blender community, iClone communities, DAZ communities, regardless. There's
TMUnderground.com community.
Yep, there you go. There's the plug, TM Underground community. So all of these communities, they share that part, that regardless of from what angle or which side of it is about telling their stories and making their movies. And as a result, these people might do this for a living, but when they're in that community context, they want to share. Like Dulci was saying, they want to help. And it makes for, in most cases, a very pleasant experience. That's not true of everybody, obviously. There's always
someone might say no, and that's their prerogative.
That's right. That's right. The worst they're going to do is say no.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, people saying no is actually far rarer than you'd think.
I would agree. That actually leads us to one of the things with the radio interview that we're doing for today, because it's for the Machinima Expo. It wouldn't actually be right if this was just audio. So we're actually going to be taking the radio interview and creating our own video machinima of the interview. So cool. I have to ask you if you have any aversion to being created as an iClone character for the purposes of the video that's going to play at the Machinima Expo.
Well, oddly enough, that'll actually be quite a novel experience for me. Despite having been working with Machinima for so long, I don't think anyone's ever actually created a avatar of me. So yeah, no, go ahead. That'll be really cool.
fabulous.
perfect.
And
'Cause
I clone you.
I'm quite fond of creating character avatars, and I promise to do you justice as well.
Excellent.
So, Machinima's been around for a long time. I don't see it going anywhere far away. I see it evolving and expanding and moving along, but I don't think people working at home with games, with the software you're talking about like Unity and iClone, I don't think it's going to disappear anytime soon. I'm assuming you guys agree with that.
Clearly.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think Machinima is far more present these days than it ever has been. I mean, for goodness sake, if you look at the production process for Avatar, James Cameron is making Machinima. He may not call it that, and at some point it gets run through a slower render process, but essentially he's making Machinima. Machinimas are part of the pre-visualization process of almost every Hollywood film now. Obviously, it's being raised to new heights in the cutscenes for computer games. We know that a lot of the top Machinima names have been hired by computer games companies to go and work for them. I noticed just the other day, Blizzard Entertainment is hiring more Machinima artists, and they're actually calling it that, Machinima artists. It's going from strength to strength.
And Blizzard's one of the ones you look at things like World of Warcraft and the vast amount of Machinima films that have been produced from World of Warcraft, from Blizzard itself, and it's one of those things that, and some of them are fantastic. Some of them are just obviously done a couple of kids, but they're having some fun with it, and but it's just impressive what can be out because it's entertainment. It's pure, unadulterated entertainment.
Well, I think Blizzard have done something very smart and quite unexpected for a company that's traditionally been quite controlling about its intellectual property. In that they produced this Machinima license, or video license as they call it, and they made it very, very permissive. I mean, they are, to the best of my knowledge, there are only 2 companies in the world that say not only can you make Machinima with our game, but you can actually make money off it using YouTube monetization. And clearly they've looked at it and seen which way the wind was blowing, and they've decided to make that call. But it has paid dividends for them because of the amount of free advertising they get and the amount of people who will choose to make Machinima on that platform rather than another platform like an Electronic Arts game where essentially you have no rights.
Yeah, and you'll actually have people that will utilize that might not even be gamers, but will be utilizing the game engine and specifically for that purpose. They have no interest in playing the game. They have interest in making movies using the game.
Well, yeah. Look at what Xbox just announced this past week with their Machinima app going on the Xbox One starting November 22nd. Did you guys read about that?
I did not.
Exciting stuff. Yeah, it's Snap Machinima. You can right in the Xbox itself. You don't have to worry about having a secondary application installed. It's just right there on it. You can play the game and record it. You can also have another screen running the actual game, so you can kind of keep track of where you're at. But it's the Xbox One Smart Glass experience and the Sidekick Machinima experience. So just coming out in November.
That's really very cool. I hadn't heard about that. I know that PlayStation tried to do something similar with a while ago.
So basically, Machinima, very powerful, and future listener at the Machinima Expo who's watching this right now, you want some great examples of what people are making, go through the archives of the past 5 Machinima Expos and enjoy the ones that are being spotlighted this year because it just keeps getting better and better and better.
I will agree with you.
Thank you. And Hugh, if we want to find out more about what you're doing, let us know where we can go to keep up with the latest Hugh Hancock news. Well,
the absolute best place to go and look for what I'm doing at the moment is strangecompany.org, which is the production company that I have been running since 1997, making Machinima. I'm actually working a lot more these days to keep the blog updated and keep people abreast of what I'm doing and the new technologies we're experimenting with, the new approaches we're trying. So you should get fed a fair amount of insight into what we're doing there, and obviously I will also announce films as and when they're made. One of the big things I'm working on these days is increasing the speed at which I can make films, because we have had a bit of a tendency for a while of releasing a film about every 5 years, and I'd rather change that. That's
a lofty goal, but and again, like we talked about already, I think that you said so yourself, even obviously with the technology and the improvements and the capability and the pipelining, that that you get yourself a good script, you're going to be able to do it much faster than that.
Yes. Well, it's one problem which we've seen in the past, and I think is now being resolved with Machinima to a certain extent, is that the pipeline is settling down. Having worked with Machinima since Quake, we've had to completely reinvent the pipeline that we use to make films, something like 7 or 8 times. And every time you do that, it's a massive slowdown because you have to relearn everything from the ground up. I mean, we had a pipeline for Eschaton 1 using Quake 1, then Quake 2 came out with a different version of key grip and a whole bunch of new tools. We had to learn how to do that. Then Half-Life, we had to learn how to use that. Then we developed the Machinima production kit. We had to learn how to use that. Then a bunch of other engines, I can't even remember them all. Then with Bloodspell, we were working with Neverwinter Nights. Again, completely different pipeline, completely different way of doing things, completely different way of collaboratively filmmaking. And now with Death Knight Love Story, we've moved to using Motion Builder and 3D Studio Max and a lot of professional tools. And this tool called Mac Studio Pro, which sadly didn't stand the test of time. But in the last 5 years, it seems like the rate at which Machinima tools turn over is diminishing. You've got things like Second Life and iClone, Movie Storm, Motion Builder, which have all been around for a while. And that's going to allow people to start making movies faster purely because they learn the tips and tricks of their individual tool. I mean, I'm sure the first time...
That's right.
Sorry.
They integrate... Sorry, no, I was just going to say they integrate well now. Again, that was one of the biggest, obviously advancements, in my opinion, with iClone was it's linking to other pipelines so that the Maya users, the Max users, the Unity users, pulling in outside game assets into scenario, or vice versa, exporting the iClone where you're comfortable creating the content or your motions or your your set designs, and then exporting to your existing pipeline through FBX formats and different capabilities, so that it doesn't limit the individual to say, well, you have to do it in this thing. You can utilize whatever tool is best for you to get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think iClone was quite a pioneer in that, actually. It's increasingly becoming obvious these days. Mac Studio Pro, which is what we used for Death Knight Love Story, it's a wonderful piece of software. Unfortunately, the company went bust. But
Right.
The big limitation with it is that you can get content into it, but you can't get content out of it. And that has turned out to be such a limitation that I'm pretty much putting a flat rule. I will not use anything that doesn't have two-way import-export now. It's just such a problem if you don't have free interoperability. And
Yep.
things like FBX and the new Alembic format, which I'm really excited about, Alembic is very cool, are really helping with that.
Well, I love talking to you guys, but I did promise Ricky Grove and the Machinima Expo personnel that we would have a shorter show today. So decided to be continued. Just consider this a tease for future conversations with you. And
I'd be very happy to come back. This has been good fun.
Excellent. And a big thank you to everybody involved in the Machinima Expo. We know that there's a lot going on behind the scenes that not everyone here knows about, because we're just here to enjoy the show. So thank you for all your hard work, and thank you, Wolf and Hugh, for talking with me today.
You're welcome, and I'm very pleased that the Machinima Expo doesn't have me as the emo wolf boy for this year. That I have creative ability over my own representation.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how we look once you animate us. Maybe you will be emo wolf boy. We don't know yet.
We'll see.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much for having me.
Show on iClone, you can hear when you're at home. He likes to think, she likes to choke him on his drink. So listen to Dulci and the Wolf.